In Chapter 6, we're asked the question, how do I reorganize to capture maximum value quickly? Now, the second that we reorganize, or even to an extent thinking about reorganizing, we lose a certain amount of value. We lose institutional memory, things are different, people are climbing up the learning curve, and it sets us back. And so the real question with any reorganization is, how quickly can we not just achieve where we were, but how quickly can we exceed our previous capacity and our previous abilities? So in relation to reorganizations, why do a reorganization, or why do we see them so commonly today? If we were to discuss reorganizations 30, 40 years ago, it would have seemed like a weird or rare event. But now it's become very common. So why is it done? It's a variety of reasons: strategic focus, drive growth, improve decision making as previously discussed, reduce costs, enhance accountability, all good reasons. But underlying all of this is change. Fundamentally, the purpose of the reorganization is to change and improve, and that's going to be done either as knowledge increases or as the environment or circumstances change. So as the environment, as that change accelerates, you'll also see a change in the optimal organization for your company. And what may have been optimal 10, 20, or even 5 years ago, that might be the opposite of the best design that you could possibly have today. And so there's this incentive to reorganize, but to do so effectively. Also, 82% of executives have reported that they've experienced a significant organizational redesign. And I believe those 70% were in the last 2 years. But the majority of executives believe they will experience a redesign in the next 2 years. So it's expected of you. This is something you are going to run into. You will see this. And because of that, you need to be prepared for it, both to drive it and also to support it, whether you're leading this change or just supporting that change. And so the quote from David Ulrich is that as organization design happens more and more, every leader needs to know how to do it well. Basically, it's gone from a rare event to a common event, and so we need to get good at it. Now, reorganizing is very difficult to do. There are many, many examples of success and failure that we could spend hours going over, many examples of successful or unsuccessful reorganizations. But some of the key lessons to draw are that less than half actually report that they achieve their objectives wholly or partially. And actually a little less than half as well just totally abandon the reorganization during implementation. It just doesn't work out. And then a further 10% is even worse. It's not working out, but they push through with it anyway, with an overall negative impact. And this quote from the book I thought was great, because I feel it's very representative of when reorganizations go wrong. And this was from a Yahoo executive. He said, "The great people leave because they don't feel they have the tools and authority to be successful with what they are notionally responsible for. Or because there are so many people who think they are in charge they can't get anything done. The mediocre people stay as they are protected and not held accountable." There are many fantastic executives that you'll see around Silicon Valley and elsewhere that all have Yahoo in their resume. This was very common, especially at that time period. Now, one of the first lessons of a reorganization is that all of the levers must be used. You're familiar with the boxes and lines approach, where you have your organization, your box and your lines with all of the people filled in with all these roles. And some people think that reorganization just means, we're just going to shuffle these boxes and lines around, and then we're going to somehow end up with success. Now, a successful reorganization almost always needs a more holistic approach. And that holistic approach has a lot of levers across not just the structure of the boxes and lines, but also the processes that are involved and the people that are involved. And so you're looking through this, you're not just considering boxes and lines and roles and responsibilities, but you want to be thinking through, how is this process, how are these critical processes that define our competitive advantage going to work in this new environment? How is performance management going to work? What about the informal networks? Are the skills and talents going to be in place? What about culture? Very, very important for change management with culture, behaviors, and mindsets. So we need to think of structure and process and people. One way I heard this explained is that instead of just thinking through the boxes and lines, start putting yourself in the shoes of those in these positions and think through what is needed for them to succeed and thrive in their position. Do they have the right resources in place if they get stuck with a problem? Use that empathy to put yourself in their shoes and see if you would have the ability to succeed. And put away your optimistic bias and put on your hat that's a little bit more antagonistic in nature to see what's going to break down in this new reorganized structure. Now, agility is a more recent concept, but fundamentally it's combining stability with speed together. And it's something that high-performing organizational structures have, so therefore in any reorganization we should keep agility in mind. But what do we mean by this agility of stability and speed? Well, innovative companies, most innovative companies are considered stable, but they're also dynamic and changing and fast, and they're getting to market quickly. Why are they also considered stable? Well, it's because they have this underlying culture, say, or underlying processes, or something stable underlying it, and then within that stability, they're able to respond and act quickly. It's not just chaos. So the analogy from the book is a smartphone analogy of you have a smartphone, and the hardware and the operating system is a certain stability and the rules and structure. And then within, say, an app store, you have app development and deployment, and it's quick, and you can release quickly and adapt and change. You have the certain stability elements as well as the speed elements, and you combine them together effectively to create an agile organization. So some examples of this would be establishing very strong cultural values to promote stability, and then you empower your frontline managers in order to make decisions. So it's done with speed and effectively in a way that could be, say, transparent and enhance accountability. Or you could take an organization and you could organize it along a primary axis, but at the same time you could then facilitate the formation of these temporary groups to meet specific needs. So that addresses the speed element. So there's a certain amount of stability, but also amount of speed and adaptability that creates this agile organization. It's something to keep in mind, just in the back of our minds in any sort of reorganization. So here are the 9 rules for reorganizations. And no matter whether you are the CEO or the business unit manager who's driving this reorganization, or if you're somewhere along the way and you're just trying to facilitate and make this reorganization occur successfully, which if you're in that situation, that's something that should be a priority. These are 9 rules that can help you no matter where you are within this reorganization. And the first is to focus on the long-term strategy of what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. Not just, we have these pain points, and so we're going to make this reorganization to address these short-term pain points. It doesn't make nearly as much sense as focusing on the driving purpose of the organization. And there's going to be a lot more buy-in if you can sell it and create the narrative around what we're trying to all accomplish together. The second is to survey the whole scene. Remember, structure, process, and people. That you need to get that input and understand each one of those steps along the way. Also, you want to be structured. Along with this, you want to create multiple options, and you want to test them under various scenarios. It's not, we are going to be doing a matrix organization and let's just launch. Be willing to consider many, many different ideas. I'd much rather listen to someone who has 20 ideas, but they're considering 2 of their best ones, rather than one person who has one really good idea. The person who's thought through 20 different options is most likely to have chosen those final 2 that are appropriate for the organization. So once again, reiterating, go beyond lines and boxes. You're not just surveying the whole scene of structure, process, and people, but you're implementing the change across structure, process, and people. Of course, along with this, you're going to need, as you make these changes, you might not have the right people for the right positions. You might need to develop internally. You might need to find new people that correspond with this new organizational structure. So that talent draft needs to be well-defined and transparent. Along with this, you'll need to understand the fundamentals of change management. How do you create and shift mindsets? How do you create that narrative that drives the organization so that you can unfreeze it, make the changes necessary, and freeze it again? Of course, one of the great comparisons is that when we do a capital expenditure project, we have all the numbers and the scenarios and sensitivity analysis. We put in all this work, but for some reason when we do a human capital expenditure or reorganization, we just say, oh, we'll go with our gut, or this looks good, or some consultant presented this on a piece of paper and we like it. No, that's not good enough. We need short and long-term metrics for human capital. We need to be just as rigorous with human capital as we are with capital expenditure. Number 8 is communicate, which is always key with change management. You need to create and guide the narrative and not let it run away from you. And finally, it's to manage transitional risks, to monitor and mitigate. So one thing that you'll see with any reorganization, and it's something that I've seen in all of the examples that I can think of, is that whenever there's been a reorganization, say within a sales organization, is that you have certain salespeople jump ship, they jump to another company, and then they end up taking some of your customers with them. And you're like, well, was this reorganization even worth it if we're losing 5% of our customer base or whatever it happens to be? Well, it might not be. You need to manage those transitional risks and monitor and mitigate them so that you're jumping with a parachute. So our summary for today is that reorganizations have become increasingly more common. They're happening more and more and more, probably because the environment, the business environment and the organizational environments have been changing faster and faster. And so these reorganizations have become ever more common. Now, in order to do it, now that we're doing it so much, well, we need to do it successfully now, and successful reorganizations are actually uncommon. And so in order to do this, no matter whether you are at high level, medium level, lower level manager, let's say, you are responsible for a successful reorganization for your team. So use all the levers, walk through the structure, process, and people so that the reorganization can happen and happen effectively. Remember that successful organizations tend to be agile, that they have both the stability and the speed element, not chaos, and not just stability without any change or speed. And finally, review the 9 rules and make sure you understand the fundamentals of change management so that you can implement a successful reorganization for any team at any level in the organization.